Hey, listen up. On November 3rd, California residents have the opportunity to make history. It's the statewide election, and in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, we've highlighted 3 propositions on the ballot that can bring us closer to a future of racial equity. Let's jump in. Vote yes on Proposition 16. It's a California constitutional amendment to enable affirmative action. First, let's uncover what affirmative action is. Affirmative action involves taking an individual's race, gender, or income into account to increase opportunities given to marginalized communities. To correct our nation's history of discriminatory laws that have harmed people of color, laws like affirmative action are needed. So, how exactly does affirmative action achieve this, and why should you support it? Unfortunately, a history of systemic racism leaves white households far wealthier than their Black and Latinx counterparts. Middle-income white households have 3 times as much wealth as their Black counterparts. This directly correlates with quality of education. Wealthy families are far more likely to relocate to better school districts, afford expensive test prep services, benefit from legacy admissions, and afford college tuition. They also attend schools that provide more extracurricular activities, sports programs, and college preparatory resources. Importantly, affirmative action does not mean that there are racial quotas for college admissions or that race is the only factor considered. It simply lets colleges consider race as a factor in a well-rounded evaluation, allowing them to account for the systemic differences between opportunities granted to students of color. But it's not just Latinx and Black students that affirmative action helps. Studies reveal that affirmative action helps less wealthy Asian Americans. Opponents say affirmative action directly harms Asian American students. However, without affirmative action, the spots would likely go to wealthy donor families. Ultimately, these legacy-based admissions are the source of many racial disparities and unfair admissions results. Beyond equality, higher test scores, racial bias reduction, and a greater chance of seeking integrated settings later in life are just some of the many benefits of socioeconomically and racially diverse classrooms. Ultimately, voting yes on Proposition 16 is in the best interest of you and your student. Vote yes on Proposition 17. This would amend California's constitution to allow people on parole for felonies to vote. What is parole? Parole is where someone is conditionally released from prison and serves the rest of their sentence under certain restrictions and supervision. Voting yes on Proposition 17 plays an essential role in strengthening democracy and living up to the ideals of our founding fathers. Currently, Californians cannot vote until they have served their prison and parole terms. However, parole itself is a process that helps reintegrate well-behaved prisoners back into society. Individuals out on parole have demonstrated good behavior during their sentence and have been deemed as non-dangerous. They pay taxes, raise families, and contribute to their communities, just like everyone else. So, why should parolees be denied the right to vote in elections that directly affects both them and their families? Because of California's restrictions, there are nearly 50,000 Californians who are not in prison but still can't vote. Proposition 17 would benefit parolees of all races, but in particular, since 2/3 of those affected are Latinx or Black, Prop 17 would make voting equally accessible to all races. California is behind 19 states that let parolees vote, including Montana, Utah, Ohio, and North Dakota. Moreover, extending the right to vote to parolees is long overdue, as this restriction hasn't been upended since the early 1970s. Voting is one of the most sacred American rights. It shouldn't be withheld from people who have served their sentence and are ready for a fresh start. Voting yes on Proposition 17 will strengthen California's democracy for everyone. Vote yes on Proposition 25, which would eliminate cash bail. What is cash bail? Currently, people who are legally innocent have to pay a certain amount of money in order to be released before their trial. This unfairly ties freedom to wealth. In fact, in 2009, 34% of defendants were jailed solely because they could not even afford bail. Additionally, studies have found that those held pre-trial because they could not afford bail were 40% more likely to commit a low-level criminal offense later on. This is because while people are held pre-trial, they cannot work and consequently lose their source of income, further incentivizing them to resort to crime. Instead, Proposition 25 would replace bail with pre-trial risk assessment for defendants. Low-risk offenders would not be held pre-trial, but would be closely supervised to ensure that they appear at court and do not commit another crime. Those that are high risk would remain in jail, because a judge believes they pose an immediate threat to the community or would be likely to avoid court. Medium risk offenders would be carefully decided on a case-by-case basis. Eliminating bail works. In fact, Contra Costa has partially implemented it, and 96% of those who qualify for pre-trial release did not commit a new offense. During the crisis with COVID-19, an emergency zero bail order eliminated cash bail statewide from April to June, and there weren't any proven upticks in crime. Voting yes on Proposition 25 helps prevent the criminal justice system from continuing to be a game of wealth and helps divert much-needed funds away from jails. This November 3rd, do your part and cast your ballot. And remember, your actions can make history.